The night the rose first bloomed, the city was drowning in rain, and so was his life. The streets outside his window glistened with reflections of broken streetlights, each puddle looking like a crack in the world itself. He stood alone in a narrow room that smelled of dust, old books, and forgotten dreams, feeling the weight of years pressing against his chest. Some lives do not collapse all at once. They crumble slowly, silently, until one day you realize there is nothing left to hold. For him, that realization arrived on a night when hope felt like a cruel joke, and the future seemed already decided without his consent. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that can change a life, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive, stories that remind us we are not as alone as we feel. His name was Elias, and once, long ago, he had believed his life would matter. He had grown up in a modest neighborhood where dreams were fragile but alive, where he spent his childhood chasing sunlight through narrow alleys and imagining a future brighter than the present. But life, as it often does, began to strip those dreams away piece by piece. His father passed too early, leaving behind unpaid bills and a silence that filled every room. His mother followed not long after, worn down by illness and grief. And Elias found himself standing alone at the edge of adulthood, carrying responsibilities far heavier than his years. He worked endless hours at jobs that barely paid enough to survive, watching others move forward while he stayed trapped in the same place, aging without progress. Time became a blur of exhaustion. Days passed in gray repetition, and nights stretched long and sleepless. He tried to study, to improve his skills, to find a way out, but failure followed him like shadow. Every rejection letter felt like confirmation of his worst fears, that he was invisible, replaceable, and destined to be forgotten. Friends drifted away, chasing their own lives, and soon there was no one left to notice when Elias stopped smiling, when he stopped dreaming altogether. The city moved fast, indifferent to his quiet suffering, and he learned how easy it was to disappear while still breathing. It was during one of those heavy evenings, when the rain seemed determined to wash everything away, that he noticed the small, abandoned courtyard behind his building. He had lived there for years, yet never paid it much attention. The place was neglected, filled with cracked concrete, broken pots, and weeds fighting for survival. Something about that forgotten space drew him in, perhaps because it mirrored his own conditions so perfectly. He began spending time there after work, sitting on a broken bench, letting the silence wrap around him. It was the only place where the noise of the world faded enough for him to breathe. One day, while clearing debris out of boredom more than intention, Elias noticed a single rose bush struggling near a crumbling wall. Its leaves were dull, its stem bent, and it looked as though it had been trampled and abandoned like everything else in the courtyard. Yet, despite its condition, there was something stubborn about it, a quiet refusal to die. He did not know why, but he felt drawn to it. Perhaps he saw himself in that fragile plant, clinging to life without knowing why. With no real plan, he began to care for it, watering it with whatever he could spare, clearing the weeds around it, protecting it from the harsh winds that swept through the narrow space. Caring for the rose became a ritual. After long, draining days, Elias would return home and tend to the small bush, his hands moving gently, his mind momentarily at peace. He spoke to it sometimes, not in words meant to be heard, but in thoughts filled with quiet longing. He shared his exhaustion, his fears, his sense of being left behind. The rose did not respond, yet somehow it listened. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the bush began to change. Its leaves grew greener, its stems stronger, as if absorbing the care Elias poured into it. As the rose grew, so did something inside him. He started waking earlier, feeling a faint sense of purpose pulling him from sleep. He began reading again, learning again, allowing himself to believe that maybe effort was not always wasted. The rose did not fix his life, but it reminded him that growth was possible even in broken places. The courtyard, once a symbol of neglect, started to transform under his hands. He cleaned it bit by bit, adding small touches, making it a space where life could exist again. Then, one morning, after a particularly difficult night filled with doubts and memories, Elias stepped into the courtyard and froze. The rose had bloomed. A single, deep red flower stood open against the grey walls, vibrant and impossibly beautiful. It felt unreal, like a secret meant only for him. He stood there for a long time, his chest tight, eyes burning with emotions he could not name. That rose had bloomed despite everything, despite neglect, despite harsh conditions. It bloomed because someone had cared, because someone had believed it was worth saving. That moment changed him more than he expected. For the first time in years, Elias felt seen, not by another person, but by life itself. The rose became a symbol of his own survival, a reminder that he, too, could bloom under the right care. Inspired, he began making small changes. He applied for opportunities he once believed were out of reach. He volunteered at a local community center, teaching children basic skills, discovering a sense of connection he had been missing for so long. Slowly, people began to notice him, not because he demanded attention, but because he radiated quiet determination. But life does not allow transformation without testing resolve. Just as Elias began to feel hope, tragedy threatened to tear it away. One evening, a powerful storm swept through the city, fiercer than any before. Rain poured relentlessly, winds howled through the narrow streets, and Elias rushed home with a sinking feeling in his chest. All he could think about was the courtyard, the rose, exposed to the storm's fury. When he finally reached the building, he ran outside, heart pounding, only to find the courtyard flooded and the rose bush bent dangerously low, petals torn, stem cracked. The sight broke something inside him. He knelt there in the rain, feeling the familiar weight of helplessness returning. It felt cruel, almost mocking, that the one thing giving him hope could be destroyed so easily. For a moment, despair threatened to consume him, whispering that nothing ever lasts, that hope only makes loss more painful. He considered walking away, letting the storm take what it wanted, just as life always had. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the memory of that first bloom, or the months of care he had given without expecting anything in return. Elias gathered the broken stem, supporting it as best he could, shielding the plant from the wind with his own body. He stayed there until the storm weakened, soaked, shivering, but unwilling to give up. That night, he realized that resilience was not about avoiding pain, but about choosing to protect what mattered, even when it hurt. The days that followed were uncertain. The rose looked fragile, damaged, and Elias feared it might not survive. Yet he continued to care for it, more gently than ever, refusing to abandon it now. In doing so, he discovered a new strength within himself. He no longer felt like a victim of circumstance, but an active participant in his own life. That shift, subtle but profound, began to reflect in everything he did. His work improved, his confidence grew, and opportunities slowly began to open. Months later, the rose surprised him again. Not only did it survive, but it bloomed once more, stronger, fuller, more radiant than before. Elias smiled as he stood there, sunlight warming his face, understanding that growth often follows hardship. The rose had not bloomed in spite of the storm, but because it endured it. And so had he. The courtyard became a small sanctuary, a place where neighbors began to gather, drawn by its quiet beauty. Elias found himself part of a community again, his isolation slowly fading as his life changed. Elias never forgot where he started. He continued to care for the courtyard, for the rose, and for others who felt forgotten. He learned that kindness does not require grand gestures. Sometimes it is simply showing up day after day, refusing to let something beautiful die. The rose, in its silent way, had taught him that, before the story ends, take a moment and comment below. Share a word, a feeling, or a memory this story stirred in you, your comment might be the encouragement someone else needs today. Years later, Elias often reflected on how close he had come to giving up, how easily his story could have ended differently. He realized that the rose had bloomed only for him, not because it belonged to him, but because he was finally ready to see it. It was a mirror of his own heart, waiting patiently for care, attention, and belief, for nurturing that fragile life. He had learned to nurture himself. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own struggles or gave you hope for healing, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach hearts that need them most. In the end, Elias understood that life does not promise easy paths or perfect endings. What it offers instead are moments, small and quiet, where choice matters, a choice to care, to stay, to believe in growth even when surrounded by brokenness. The rose that bloomed only for him was never just a flower. It was proof that even the most neglected lives can flourish when met with patience and love. And as long as there are hearts willing to nurture hope, there will always be roses waiting to bloom.